Okay, so today we're going to be talking about something that came up several times in the office this week, and it is about your mesencephalon. Now, I'm getting some feedback from people's computer there, so I'm going to unmute. I'm going to mute everybody so that I can't hear you. So you're going to have to post a little note so I can see that you want to be unmuted if you have a question, because I was hearing myself in your speaker. So we're going to talk about a big word today: mesencephalic. Your mesencephalon. We're going to have a quiz on it at the end, so make sure you get this down. But your mesencephalon is a part of the brain. You have the. If I put my hands on top of my head, that part of my brain that's underneath the skull there is called the cerebral cortex. That's what would be considered the newest part of the brain. Some animals do not have a cerebral cortex. Then you have a deeper part of the brain, or the paleocortex and the archaeocortex, that control more instinctual things. So that's what we're going to talk about today, that deeper part of the brain that controls more instinctual things. So if you're a patient on this call and we tested you with the heart rate variability test, where we put that little thing on your chest and it measured your sympathetic versus parasympathetic balance, that's what we're discussing here. So remember, we talked about that you have two sides to your nervous system: your voluntary nervous system and your involuntary nervous system. That involuntary nervous system is called your autonomic nervous system. So that autonomic or automatic nervous system controls all your organ function. That's what we're talking about, that autonomic nervous system. The autonomics are separated into two distinct components: the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. Why am I telling you all this? Because it is really important if you're dealing with any serious disease. Your sympathetics are your fight or flight mechanism. So in case you got a big scary situation, then your sympathetics kick in. A policeman pulls you over, you feel the effects of your sympathetics kicked in. Your heart rate went up, you feel a little flush, maybe you're sweating, your blood pressure is higher, you're nervous, you can't really think straight, your eyes are dilated, your blood is shunted to your extremities, all for the purpose of fleeing or fighting. So it's your fight-flight mechanism. So it's to deal with a crisis for a very short period of time. You have a crisis in your life, your sympathetics kick in if you're healthy, and you can fight that situation and you can deal with that situation, and then it's done and it goes back into normality. So the sympathetics are not supposed to stay in a stuck-on position. The opposite side are the parasympathetics. Parasympathetics. Their purpose is to stimulate your immune function, stimulate detoxification, stimulate gut function, stimulate sexual function, stimulate making white blood cells and making red blood cells. All those things, think of, we don't need any of those things to be taking place if a polar bear is chasing us. So this is the mechanism that God gave us to deal with situations in our life. If we're being chased by a polar bear, we don't need to worry about detoxifying because we're going to get eaten by a polar bear. So who cares if we die of mercury toxicity and our liver shuts down in 10 years? We have 5 minutes to get away from the polar bear. We're getting chased by a polar bear. Our sexual function's going to shut down. We don't need to procreate. We're not going to be long enough to see our children if we don't get away from the polar bear. we're being chased by a polar bear. We don't need to make white blood cells and fight off an immune response. Who cares if that virus kills us in 7 days? We're going to get eaten in 5 minutes by a polar bear. So when I have this heightened sympathetic stimulant, it's going to shut down my parasympathetics. If, for whatever reason in my life, we'll talk about those in a bit, I'm stuck in a hypersympathetic state, I will have a lower impact of my parasympathetics, which are kind of essential for fighting any chronic disease. So if I'm dealing with cancer, I need to have a healthy parasympathetic response. If I'm stuck in a sympathetic dominance, I'm going to have a more difficult time, not impossible, but a more difficult time fighting that cancer, because my parasympathetics, which stimulate an immune response, are going to be functioning relatively less healthy than my sympathetics are. So why this big word mesencephalon here? It's because the part of the brain that controls the sympathetics is in a part of the brain called the mesencephalon. So the mesencephalon is in the deep part of the brain. It's part of the midbrain, and that's where the origination of the sympathetics start. And they go down your cord, they come out mainly in your thoracic spine, and they do all sorts of different things. Typically, you'll see in a heightened sympathetic response, you're going to have a slightly increased blood pressure, you're going to have increased heart rate, you're going to have maybe more perspiration. So you can see some diseases are really tied to a hypersympathetic state. Person has high blood pressure, it's piece of it from a neurological perspective is a sympathetic dominance. Person has hypersweating. Piece of it from a neurological perspective is sympathetic dominance. Now there's other things with nitric oxide and vascular integrity and all these kind of things that we're not going to get into with those diseases now, but just talking about the balance, we're talking about from a neurological perspective. So these exercises, if I do have a hypersympathetic response, we want to use these exercises if I have this high-firing mesencephalic activity. So here's some simple general treatments for hypermesencephalon. All right, so we can just read through this list. You can wear rose-colored glasses, so color affects the midbrain. And they found that rose color or amber color sunglasses, even worn in the house, can help calm the mesencephalon. So here's another sign that you have a hypersympathetic dominance. Boy, I very sensitive to sunlight. I need to wear sunglasses if I go outside. Well, why? Because if I'm in a sympathetic state, one of the things the sympathetic nervous system does is it dilates my eyes so that I can run away from the polar bear. So my eyes are a little slightly dilated more than they should be. I'm going to be more sensitive to light. They don't contract the way they should, and I'm going to be more sensitive to sunlight, and I'm going to want to wear sunglasses all the time. So wearing some rose-colored or amber-colored glasses, sometimes I've found that slightly purplish glasses work better for some people. Everybody's a little bit different. To see what you feel like calms you. Color affects the mesencephalon. Secondly, placing a cotton ball or one of those little earplugs or something in your right ear. Because what you're doing is calming the noise that's coming from the right side into the right temporal lobe, because stimulation of the left temporal lobe inhibits the mesencephalon. So putting a cotton ball or an earplug in the right ear helps calm the mesencephalon because you're inhibiting it through the left temporal lobe. I won't get into the details of that, but it works. Breathing a foul smell, whatever you consider to be a foul odor, in your right nostril. So you have to close your left nostril with your finger, and you breathe, a stinky sock or, something like that in your right nostril. okay? That will stimulate the frontal lobe to inhibit the mesencephalon. Humming or gargling to stimulate the parasympathetics will help calm the sympathetics. The parasympathetic nervous system, the main nerve trunk of the parasympathetic is called cranial nerve 10 or the vagus or vagal nerve, and it innervates your throat at your larynx, and it also innervates your another key point to hit for the parasympathetics is the rectal area. That's one of the main reasons why coffee enemas are so good for cancer patients. Who you read, oh, coffee enemas are so good because they help you detox. Well, yes, they do. I think the main reason why coffee enemas are so good for cancer patients because the caffeine stimulating the vagal nerve stimulates a parasympathetic reaction. So humming and gargling can stimulate the parasympathetics, but to really get a good stimulation, you really got to gargle hard for a while. What should I gargle? It doesn't make any difference. So humming and singing and can help stimulate the parasympathetics, which will in turn calm down the sympathetics. Slow, deep belly breathing can help stimulate a calming sensation to the sympathetics. Playing memory games like card games, like you remember the concentration game where you have all the cards out and you turn over a jack, a queen, oh, turn it back over, a queen, oh, where's that other queen? Those can be helpful to stimulate a parasympathetic, and actually what you're doing with the memory game, is you're stimulating frontal lobe action, and that is then inhibitory to the sympathetics. If you have a chi machine, that can be helpful. A chi machine is one of those things you lay on your back and you put your feet in this thing that jiggles you back and for your legs in this thing. You put your ankles in this little apparatus that goes back and forth, and it kind of jiggles your legs back and forth. And it can be good for lymphatic congestion in your lower extremities. But it stimulates indirectly because it's stimulating the cerebellum. It's actually quite a good cerebellar exercise. And then stimulating the frontal lobe. Any stimulation of the frontal lobe will be calming to the sympathetics because the frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, firing back onto the mesencephalon is inhibitory. So if you're going to stimulate the frontal lobe, you will inhibit the sympathetics. Vibrational therapy, like a foot vibrator or those vibrating pads. Everybody in their binder has in the back of the food section, the last page is a picture of a foot vibration plate that you can buy on Amazon for a couple $100, and it's really a wonderful tool for brain therapy, and it will help calm the sympathetics. Other dietary considerations to calm the sympathetics have to do with lowering your glutamate levels. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Any inflammatory foods can stimulate the mesencephalon, like gluten, dairy, and also histamine can stimulate the mesencephalon. Emotional helps. It's really important is that the amygdala and the mesencephalon are very closely related. Your amygdala is where you house all your emotional memories. So if you were abused as a child, or you just have memories of emotional traumas in any way, shape, or form, and you don't compare those with somebody else, how are they affecting you? So any stimulus of memories can stimulate a sympathetic reaction, and everybody's experienced that. Think of your divorce, or think of when you got audited by the IRS, or think of when you were yelled at by your mother, or something like that. You already feel your heart rate go up. So dealing with those past emotions is extremely helpful. So if you need counseling, you need talk therapy, you need somebody just to share that with, you need to read a book about how to deal with that. That's why we put that heart condition section in your binder. Bringing it to the Lord and really pouring it out at his feet is is a big help, but sometimes you need help with that. So we're going to switch to this little piece here. I'm going to unmute people here. So if you guys have questions, you can talk. We're going to talk about that glutamate section here. I know we touched on this last time on how bad it is for stimulated mTOR pathways. I think we talked about this last time. And that stimulates cell reproduction, which is what we don't want to do. But glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter to the sympathetics too. So glutamine right there is an amino acid that's found in protein, right? Especially if you have GAD or DAO gene defects or GLUT gene defects also, you're going to produce a lot of glutamate, and that's in itself stimulates mTOR, but glutamate also stimulates. We could have another arrow if we're going to do, let's talk about just sympathetics here, and we could have glutamate stimulating sympathetic, stimulating mesencephalon, upregulating mesencephalon. So just more things to consider about how bad our food system is in putting glutamates in everything to make you addicted to them. Okay, then I did want to touch on this a little bit too, in the glutamate section of the practitioner's report. Any questions while this is opening up? If anybody wants a copy of that form, that this form right here, let me know and I can email it to you. But you got it memorized for the quiz anyhow. So this is the glutamate piece that you look at when you're looking at how well does this person handle glutamate. And I didn't get to this last time we spoke about mTOR. So I did, this is what I wanted to talk about really, is other factors that stimulate cancer growth with glutamates. And these are the different genes that we're looking at. So this happens to be a cancer patient that is just put in here as a sample. And we look at her genes. Oh, I gave it away, it's a female. The SLC genes on this person, she's got a lot of SLC genes and much worse than the mean of the population of this group. And remember, when we look at your genes and we look at this report, the mean on here is the 23,000 people that we have in this genetic software, and they're not usually healthy people. So they're typically people with some sort of ailment. That's why they sought out our help and other doctors that use the same software. So when you look at, you don't want to be to the right of the mean. If we had a healthy cohort of people, the mean would be over here somewhere. So we don't want to be to the right of the mean. So this person already has definitely some issues in being able to deal with glutamine and its conversion to glutamate, and and their ability to get that out of their body. Now, like this, they're going to be probably to the left of the mean. See, that's better than the average there. They don't have very many defects there. The mTOR genes are tied to glutamate because with more mTOR genes, this is one of the cancer genes that we look at for cancer patients, you're going to have an upregulation of all of this, even if you didn't have any of this stuff going on. So even if you didn't have any exposure to any of these things, if you have a lot of mTOR genes, this is going to be upregulated by itself. That's why it is what we consider a cancer gene. So the thing that I remember that keeps this in check is the NRF2, the glutathione pathway, and the KEAP1 genes. KRAS genes, that's another pathway that feeds glutamate, and we need to expand this chart because KRAS feeds glutamate up on top up here. Isn't this fun? So these are all the genes that we look at when we look at, what could be driving a person's illness, whether it be cancer or Lyme or anything else. that we want to say, well, maybe we need to go on a lower glutamate diet and lower glutamine diet because you convert it to glutamate, and just give your body every chance to calm this down.
I made too much funk.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that we want to look at to try to manipulate the metabolism that's going on. The problem is I wish it was just as easy as, okay, we're just going to cut this out of our diet and we're going to all get better and our body's going to stop doing its replication process, and cancer is going to stop, and all these things, these bad things that take place with this are going to stop. The truth is we're hit with so many pieces here. And I was talking to a patient just this morning, I think, and I said, oh, I thought of something else. And oh, I got to add another box down here that hits this. It's like, it gets exhausting. It's like, gosh, we have just so destroyed our environment and our food supply. I mean, if dairy was natural and raw, would it still have IGF-1 hormone? People have asked me that. Yes, it would, because dairy is a food product for baby animals. Okay, so dairy, not because it's tainted or because it's poisoned or because there's antibiotics in it or hormones in it, which there are, but simply because it is a product for a baby to eat, a baby cow or a baby human, it has growth hormone in it because that's what helps that little baby calf grow up quickly. So that's why, we don't want any cancer patient on a lot of dairy. I mean, how many people do we really want on dairy anyhow, whether you have cancer or not? Because it has IGF-1 in it. That's intrinsic growth hormone right there. This is intrinsic growth factor 1 that stimulates mTOR for the purpose of cell replication. So this little baby calf can make a lot of muscle and grow, and cells replicate and it gets bigger. Well, we don't want that if we have cancer or not, really. And then protein drinks have amino acids that not only glutamine, but methionine is a big baddie for stimulating mTOR production. That's why we look at the MAT gene, which we got to put right there. So I understand that it's complicated, but if we just take this in pieces, then I think, and the more times we hit this repetition-wise, then I think we'll understand it more. And then it gives you food for thought for at least like, oh, now I know why I'm doing my diet the way I'm doing it. And it gives me, some stimulation to keep up with that process when we get frustrated because everybody else at the church social is eating junk food. So, all right, does that help? We're trying to take this in pieces and keep them at a half an hour, but I'm here for questions if you have any questions. No questions? All right, I will email everybody the quiz. No, you're not ready for that? All right, and make sure if you want to ask questions on Facebook, you can ask whatever questions you want. If I feel it's more appropriate for your sake to answer them over the phone or something, we will call you to answer those if we can, or if we have to make an appointment, we'll do that too. But keep up the good fight. Know you're on the right track, and we are behind you all the way, and we are praying for you every day, literally every day. I'm praying for my patients. So I hope you're praying for us too, because we are always under attack too. So be praying for protection for us, and we cherish that. So thank you much. I'm going to stop sharing this, and we'll put this recording up in just a little bit, and it'll be up on Facebook. You guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you. You too.